My name's ee-DOW-ssah. I speak 7 languages. I'm a musician and I'm the founder of the mimic method. So we teach people how to mimic in a foreign language. My approach, we teach people how to learn languages, and my approach is very unique and different from the conventional approach, which is very focused on grammar and structures and rules, and they lose track of the embodied piece, the emotional piece, the spiritual piece. So that's what we teach people through my process, and yeah, and that's what we do. I'm also starting a new project now called Muscle Fluency that teaches you how to become aware of every single muscle in your body and how to integrate it into one unified network. I have courses on facial expression and how to feel every muscle in your face. So the unifying theme of what I do is allowing you to get deeper connected to yourself and other people by having a very deep and precise understanding of what your body is actually doing in activity, in communication, and emotion. So yeah, my background, I just loved languages. In my 20s, traveled around the world. I speak 7 languages after only speaking one, English. Yeah, and I freestyle. I teach people, it's a very musical approach to my process. So I teach people not just how to speak a language, but how to rap in it, how to freestyle. Because right now what I'm doing is improvising. What we all do every single day in conversation is improvise off the top of the dome, as they say, and we kind of take it for granted, but it's a fucking miracle. Like if you just take a moment to take in what we're doing when we're speaking to each other, it's miraculous. So for me, on spiritual side, what I most love teaching people, whether it's language or music or freestyle, there's this thing that's in the way, this kind of over-structured, over-protective, analytical, inhibitory aspect of our psyche that is the main culprit stopping us from learning, from expanding, from growing. So what I'm personally interested in is how to create an experience and kind of guide someone to kind of flow around that and allow their deeper, authentic self-expression to just emerge. Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, we all know that truth and authenticity is a major fundamental factor for psychological health. And when someone, and social dynamics is another major factor in someone's health. Identity is a major factor in someone's health. So if I just take the language, foreign language thing, people go and they learn language like, oh, I'm going to learn some rules and grammar. And I always tell people on the front end, like, hey, if your goal is to become conversationally fluent in a foreign language, understand that you're embarking on a spiritual journey, because you're going to have to pass through a process of presenting yourself to the social world as an idiot. Like, Joe hablo, and like people don't really know what they're getting into. And I'm like, this is not an academic subject. This is a spiritual journey. And it's a very beautiful one, but it's a very challenging one. And if you get through the end of it, you will become a completely transformed, different person. Like so much of your identity is tied up in your original cultural piece. So when you assume a new role and new identity, it's very powerful stuff. So yeah, like it's, again, I like to come in purely technical, kind of teach you how to do it, and I'll guide you to the path and let you know what you're getting into, and then let the student kind of embark and experience their own journey and provide the communal support and the guidance for that. But yeah, it really is psychedelic. Like it's a different state of consciousness when you're speaking Chinese. You know what I mean? And the process for getting into that is it's like a 6-month LSD trip. You know what I mean? Like it's a slow burn LSD trip. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not an expert on neurolinguistic programming. I know a fair bit about it. There's a distinction in my head between, when you're doing NLP, you're doing it in your native language. Is a very high level, intellectual level of the words we're using to encode our reality. And when you're coming into a foreign language, you're starting from scratch. So for me, there's a kind of a deeper like a sub-verbal, embodied, emotional piece. If I'm speaking Portuguese, like Brazilian Portuguese, yeah, I'm using different words, but more fundamentally, I'm using different mannerisms. Like, yeah, cara, tudo bem? Ah, sim, pô. Like I'm more like empathetic. I'm more like touchy-feely because that's how Brazilians are, at least where I was when I learned it. Versus European Portuguese, where I've also spent a lot of time, and they're a much more kind of closed, conservative culture. So I might say the exact same words, but with a completely different vibe, different accent, but different vibe. Like, tu queres falar comigo? Sim, mas you know, and like that's how they sound in Portugal. So yeah, like I don't know, I never answered this question before, so I haven't thought about it in this depth. But when I think about when you're going to therapy and it's more at that verbal level, and I'm a very verbal person, so I think about it. You know, I think a lot about metaphor and what word I'm using to describe something. In the language learning context, is a layer underneath it, which is more about the personality, the persona, the energy that you're tapping into. So when I'm coaching people, I'm thinking in terms of like, where does this person stand in the personality spectrum? And like, what's the persona that they're the least comfortable accessing? So if it's like a very rigid person, like, oh, I'm from Texas, blah, blah, blah. Then like, cool, I'm going to have you imitate, who's the woman from Family, Modern Family, the Colombian woman? Sofia Vergara.
Yes.
I'm like, cool. I'm gonna have you mimic Sofia Vergara, and I'll get super clinical. I'm like, look at her facial muscles, look at her things. Da, 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 da. So they're just doing it. They're just doing it technically, but then they get into the character, and now they're like, no, porque hay mucha gente que está pasando, you know, and then you're like, I can't do that. It's like, why? It's not a technical issue. It's a emotional identity issue. What is that? So that's kind of more how I'm looking at it. Sure. So it's the issue of inhibition. That's kind of like one of my main enemies in life. And so the student might have within them already a deep reservoir of knowledge and knowing for how to express themselves. They might know the words. They might kind of have experienced someone already expressing that thing in the language. So the first instinct is that, like that's what comes first. But then the second part is the inhibition. The question of like, oh, did I get the conjugation right? Or like, oh, maybe I'm not pronouncing it right. Or, oh, I look stupid, I'm a gringo, blah, blah, blah. So that piece is actually doing most of the work of holding the person back in their progression. So yeah, when you can figure out ways to remove that and amplify just the kind of flow state, getting into yourself, for sure. Like when I train people, I really try to get them to into that flow state, and then when I see that they're in it, I'll say, okay, cool. I want you to stop and just map this on the Google map of your consciousness. Notice how this feels. Notice what this is like. I use music a lot in my training, so even outside of a conversation, put them into a musical flow and like notice what it's like to be feeling the beat. You're not calculating the beat. You're just allowing the beat to pass through you. This state of consciousness is the state of consciousness that you will need to drop into when you're out in the street speaking to someone in Portuguese or Spanish. So it has to, I don't understand it fully, but it definitely touches on these themes of cognitive flexibility, of neuroplasticity, because I've noticed that if I get someone into it, and then I instruct them to like try to get back into it, over time it's easier for them to get that drop. It's easier for them to just kind of return to that place. So I don't know what that actually looks like at the neurological level, but I've seen it at the external level of like, okay, this person, when I give them the cue, drop in, now they're dropping in, you know? So, anyone who's experienced that drop knows exactly what I'm talking about, but a lot of people have not experienced that. In fact, I would venture that the majority of people, they don't really know what I'm talking about with that. And that's where psychedelics comes in as well, because it's kind of like, that's why I'm interested in psychedelics and particularly in ketamine, because this has this disassociation aspect where it's like, I'm from Texas and, oh, he's from Texas. Who am I then? Like, you know what I mean? And then it creates that space for you to kind of get that separation and understand what's happening. So again, I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't really understand the deeper mechanisms, though I love to like nerd out on it. But as a teacher, I have an intuition of how to guide people to that space. And then my main objective as a teacher is helping people autonomously return to that space. Yeah, okay, I'll give you like the spiel on freestyling. So yeah, freestyle rap fundamentally has three components. That's rhythm, rhyme, and reason. So teaching in general is our job is to figure out what the micro components of any activity is and give you each one in progression. So if I break out rhythm, you see someone freestyling, you're like, oh, that's so crazy. But you break out rhythm and you're like, okay, here's a beat. I want you just to say gibberish to the beat. Da ba da ba da da ba da ba da ba. Ba ba da ba da ba da ba ba da ba ba da ba. Right? And then try to get more complex with it. Ba da ba da ba da ba ba ba. Ba da ba da ba ba da ba da ba da ba 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 da ba 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 da ba ba. And that's where the inhibition comes in, because people start off like ba 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 ba, like really basic stuff. And I'm like, no, just like let it go. So you get them a bit more flowy just with the gibberish stuff, and then boom, now you got the first R, rhythm is taken care of. Then rhyme. With rhyme, what I have you do is take a word, like ketamine, right? And then what happens in the mind, if I say what rhymes with ketamine, your mind associates that to something. For me, it would be like amphetamine, and then mezzanine, and then it keeps going, and then you get stuck for a while. You just have to wait 25 seconds, and then you're like, oh, tempting me, right? And then you'll kind of branch off out of the frame you're in, like, oh, I can do multiple words, I can do whatever. So if you capture all those words, and then you do another rhyme scheme, like chicken, lickin', sickin', and then you just capture all these rhyme schemes, then you've done the work of associative thinking. And then you can take that and combine it with the da-ba, 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 da-ba. And then you're just like, ketamine, the mezzanine, chilling on the mezzanine, right? And then, boom, now you're having fun. Reason is the part where you actually make that into, like, at first grammatical sentences, and then at a higher level, you can get to like stories and consistent kind of themes. But honestly, you don't really need that part to have fun. Like if you just have like rhythm and rhyme and you're just letting yourself go, people have already like lost their mind and they're having a good time. So yeah, that's how I do it. Like if you keep doing that, what I believe happens just kind of phenomenologically is I always ask people like what rhymes with rhyme, and 70% of people say time. And then I say, okay, what else? Time, lime, clementine, sublime, serpentine. And you can kind of like define creativity as this combination of, it's within recognizable scheme, so it rhymes. So rhyme and serpentine rhyme, right? But it's also the distance from predictability. So I say rhyme, oh, I got this rhyme, I do it all the time. They're kind of like, yeah, okay. But like, hey, I got this rhyme, slip and slide, serpentine. People are like, ooh, right? And what's going on there neurologically is you've made a connection that we all recognize as a connection, but it's much further afield than what we were expecting. But that capacity you can dial in and be like, if I just have you make rhymes for like 10 minutes, you will get to a place that you would not have gotten to before. And now that you've gotten there, it's there. Now you've made that association. So if I have you freestyle and it's kind of mix and match, what you're doing is each of those words represents a node in your like neural network. And each time you freestyle, that creativity of freestyle, you're drawing another line between each node. So like, we saw a really dope guy freestyling today, and I know what that guy went through to get to that level. Basically, if you just keep freestyling, then what you make is a super dense network of verbal rhyme associations. So when you say a word, like we walk up and he sees like my African pattern, he's like, so pattern, right? And then boom, in his brain, the word pattern emerges, and it's like, and then like 50 different rhyming words come from his experience that he can just select from in like slow motion time. So it's a skill that anyone can train and get really good at really fast. But again, our major enemy of inhibition is there. Identity is there, especially white people. Like my backstory, actually, I'm half white, half black. So, and I grew up playing violin, really good at like, math in school. Meanwhile, I'm like freestyling and playing basketball, all that kind of stuff. So like, I just did all the things. And, but like all my like black friends are kind of like, oh, wow, like, I wish I was good at school. I'm like, dude, you're like legitimately a high IQ person, but you don't see yourself. You don't identify with that. And then all the white kids, they see us freestyle and they're like, oh, I wish I could freestyle, but I can't because I'm white. I'm like, bro, like, what is going on there, buddy? Like, you can do whatever you want. Just give it a try. So again, this for me, that's my main passion. I've noticed since I was a kid this idea of identity and inhibition and how they connect to each other. And yeah, I see it as my mission as a teacher to give people like a very clear technical pathway to wherever they're trying to go, and then using that as a way to like demonstrate to them in their own body and their own minds that like all your limitations are completely bullshit. Like just fucking drop that shit, bro. Come on, let's freestyle. So yeah, that's what it's for me. Flow state is a state of consciousness that all of us have access to, and each of us has entered into at some point in our life for sure. There's a good acronym, STIR, STER. So it's characterized by a state of selflessness. So you're not like self-conscious. You're not like, oh, what do I look like in some of my teeth? Timelessness. So when you're freestyling, like it seems like you have like 3 decades to think of the next rhyming word. Effortlessness. So everything's just easy, it flows. And then richness, that's the key component. It's a high intensity experience, colors more saturated, it's just more rich. So yeah, people have flow state when they're doing their favorite activities like surfing or martial arts or chess, or in a deep conversation, freestyle rapping. That's flow state. It's a scientifically verified state. You can look at it neuroanatomically, neuroelectrically, neurochemically. But beyond all that stuff, like in your own experience, it's peak experience, it's optimal experience. You're optimized for learning, you're optimized for connection, you're just optimized for all the things that really matter in life, really. So again, that's why everything I do has this fluency and flow component in it. I've always kind of naturally been able to get into flow. So I'm always trying to figure out how to get other people in it, mostly because I'm lonely sometimes. When I'm like, no, want to flow with me, come freestyle, So like, it's just a completely different part of the mental landscape that anyone can access. And when anyone gets there, we all agree that this is the place to be. I look at flow state and then I see like the anti-flow states, which are basically depression and anxiety in my own kind of models. I don't get anxious much, but I definitely have a tendency towards depression, like a lower activation if I'm not stimulated by people and the activities I want to do, and I get in my own like bad thought patterns, then I'll get depressed. I'll get I call it the fog, and I'm just kind of like, oh, what's up? And especially during the pandemic, there's a couple of phases in that like I just got deep into a hole, and thankfully like some ketamine came my way, and I took some, and it was miraculous. Like it just the instant switch of returning to who I am, or more just kind of like I was just so deeply entrenched in whatever that thought pattern was. And I felt like I was like, man, it's going to take me years to get back to where I was. Right. And then like the thing goes, boop, like, oh, like actually like the actual material world and all the things I have around me is the same. Like it's just purely a mental state that I just popped out of. Yeah. Like for me, the word pop out, just like pop out. And it wasn't that I got into a flow state. I'm sure it wasn't in a type of flow state. It's like I popped out of like the belief, the negative limiting belief structure that I had been like trapped in. And I remember I got out of it. I had an issue with my brother and other things. I'm like, oh, my brother, this and this. And then I popped out. My brother they had just gotten pregnant. And that was a big issue of like the issues I was having with him. They just got pregnant. That's all I wanted the whole time. I was like super happy. I got that news 2 weeks earlier and I was kind of like, oh, interesting. And then I took the ketamine, I popped out, and I was like, yo, my brother's having a baby. Like, this is what I called him up. I was like, man, we got to heal this because I'm so fucking happy for you. You know what I mean? And like, so yeah, I mean, I'm really grateful for my friend actually for hooking me up. And so yeah, I wouldn't say ketamine. Yeah. yeah. But like, yeah, like, so for me, it was, I think the way I would describe it is that there's a flow state that we all know, and then there's like an infinite number of anti-flow states that you can get trapped in. And a lot of the psychedelics can like shoot you into flow state, all that kind of stuff. For me, in my experience, the way I would describe ketamine is that it just it just like lightly like pops you out of whatever anti-flow state you're in. And then from that perspective, you can start to just rebuild everything so that you can be where you want to be and get back into the flow state much more easily. Yeah, for sure, man. Like, if everyone's on a mental health journey, and one thing I kind of obsess over sometimes is I'll be in like a really deep flow state, or I'll do something like take a ketamine or like have like a hard conversation I've been avoiding for a long time, or do something I love for the first time in a long time, like music, and then I'll jump like 15 levels in consciousness, right? And then I'll be like ding, and then I'll be there, but it wouldn't be the first time I was at that level of consciousness. I'm like up 15 levels, like I've been there multiple times before. And then I'm like, I think two things. I'm like, wow, like before I was here, I forgot this existed. Like I literally forgot that this level of consciousness existed and how much better it is than what I was like 15 minutes ago. But then I'll think, I'm like, what's that mean? What's that imply about even higher up and higher up? And then you'll meet people who are higher up, and then you're like, what's going on over there? You know what I mean? And then they'll lift you up just by existing around you. You know what I mean? And so for me, the journey is like, what's at the top? You know what I mean? Like, what's at the top? Why are we always kind of just moving towards that? And so again, I'm really respect the work you guys do at Better You, because when you descend down enough levels, I've gone to really high levels of flow state and I spent a lot of time there. Nonetheless, I spent a lot of time in the dungeon. I spent a lot of time in like dark places. I've been granted a lot of gifts and blessings in my lifetime. When I'm in the dungeon, I'm absolutely convinced that I have nothing to offer to the world, and that I'm like just complete loser of nothing. I'm like, no one cares about anything I do, like blah blah blah. And if I tell that to people who know me, they're just like, that's fucking ridiculous. But it doesn't matter, because like in that state of mind, you're just there. So yeah, for me, the journey is like ascending. You're gonna fall, but getting more masterful in recognizing the drops, and more masterful at picking yourself back up when you're in the drop, not identifying with the state you're in, recognizing that there's people and communities and services and things external to you that can lift you back up. That's the human condition, is meant to be communal, and our society has kind of made us forget about that. So there's lots and lots of tools. So yeah, for me, it's just mental health and just this thing of like remembering. Like I'm a word freak, obviously, and I think about the actual etymology of like a remember. Like the ultimate top consciousness. We're members of that. We're members, but then we move away from it. So whether you're freestyling or doing a therapy session or taking ketamine, taking a psychedelic, all of these things I put in the category of remembering, but not remembering in my mind, but remaking myself a member of the highest order consciousness, where we all want to be all the time, because it's fucking amazing up there. You know what I mean? If you want to find me, go to mimicmethod.com. That's where all my language materials are. We're also launching at the end of the year musclefluency.com as another project to get completely immersed with your body for more power, less pain, more peace. So that's a whole other subject. But that's where you find me, Mim Method. That's where you find me, mimmethod.com and musclefluency.com.